Batteries, always a popular discussion and something that we all agree on, and something that comes up quite a lot online, especially most often we tend to get it on comments on unrelated videos. Your batteries are rubbish. I've had 3 of your batteries now, they've all failed, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes batteries do fail, of course. You know, we do genuinely have some batteries that are deemed as faulty, and sometimes they are not faulty, and there's causes for the reason why they fail. The reason why we only offer 6 months warranty on a battery is because there's so many variables, so many things that can cause a battery to fail that might not necessarily be fault of the product itself. So it's very hard to offer an extended warranty on something like a battery when there are a number of things that you can do wrong on an end user scale. And that's the reason why we offer 6 months. Obviously, it's up to our discretion, and obviously if we believe a battery is genuinely faulty, then fair enough. But there are, more often than not, common denominators, especially when there's somebody that's had 3 of our batteries, for example, and they say every single one of them's failed. We've had faulty batteries ourselves. You know, we've used our own boats and experienced faults with batteries. However, we've also, as you can imagine, done, gone through a variety of batteries over the years, and I've got some that are, 3 or 4 years old and they're still going. So I thought what we'll discuss today is what to do and what not to do with your batteries. Obviously, if you think our batteries are pants and that's all you want to say, that's fine, cool. Buy one elsewhere, cool, whatever, not a problem. But I'm trying to advise, or my aim here is to try and advise for those of you who are not sure about how to store your battery or what to do with your battery and how to look after it. And for those of you that maybe have had an issue in the past, and just to confirm and clarify that you're doing everything correctly. So first things first is understanding the type of battery that we use in our boats. So the battery that we use in our boats is a polylithium battery, also known as a LiPo battery. Now, this is a lithium-based battery, much better than the old school lead acid type, the big old heavy things that were used a lot in the past. The advantages of a polylithium battery are they tend to last a lot longer on a full charge. They, in general, last longer. They have a longer, sort of shelf life, let's say. As well as a number of other things such as weight as well. Obviously, old school lead acid batteries are very heavy. But the most common thing that we notice with battery failure of all the things is actually down to use. Now, one of the most common phone calls or emails or something that I'll have is, I've had your boat for 8 months, but I've only used it twice and the battery's knackered up already. Most common cause, most common thing linked to these type of batteries is lack of use. Now, the lack of use isn't the killer itself. It will to an extent. So think of it, for example, let's say you've got a car. You're using it every day, the battery's great. Obviously, when you start a car, there's an alternator that charges the battery, it self-charges, I understand that. However, with the boat, there isn't. But the fact that you're using the battery is what keeps it going, right? So, for example, if you've got a car that you put into the garage during winter for 6 months, you'll probably come to it after those 6 months and go to start it, and you'll just hear a click because the battery's gone flat, because the battery's discharged. Now, every battery, regardless of the type of battery, is naturally going to discharge at a specific rate. Now, I can't give you those rates. I don't know what the rate of discharge is of this type of battery, but it's going to discharge over time. And it's going to discharge even faster if it's left connected. So, number one piece of advice, if you're storing your boat, leave your battery disconnected. The second piece of advice that goes with this as well is if you are storing your battery, some batteries are recommended to store at 50% charge, for example. But with our batteries, we recommend fully charge them and then store them. Because the problem is if you're storing your battery part charged, say you're storing it at 50%, for example, and it discharges, say, 10%, 15%, something like that every month, and you're leaving it for 6 months, it's then going to discharge past its actual rate, past its actual threshold, its safety point. And at that point, it's going to be very hard for that battery to recover. It's going to die. Essentially, it's not going to be recoverable. And 9 times out of 10, when it's a battery that's not been used often, a boat that's not been used very often, and the battery's been left for X amount of time, that tends to be the common denominator, the common link. And as I said a moment ago, you do sometimes genuinely get faulty batteries, but most common thing is leaving them leaving them stored part charge. So, best piece of advice: if you're storing your boat, don't leave it connected. Don't leave your battery connected. Keep your battery somewhere in reasonable conditions. A lot of us are putting our gear in sheds or in a garage. And obviously during winter, the temperatures get quite a lot lower, especially here in England. And temperature is also going to make a massive difference. So if you can, keep the battery in the house. You know, don't want to keep it somewhere too hot. You don't want to keep it in a cupboard with your boiler, for example. So temperature will also make a difference. So yeah, during winter, disconnect the battery. Make sure it's fully charged when you're removing it, and then also make sure you're storing it somewhere reasonable. All of these things will make a difference as to how long your battery will last, and not just only that, how long it will last on a full charge as well. The other thing with that as well, and if you can, it's a thing that I highly recommend, is if you are using or not using the boat for a little while, to try and discharge the battery, keeping the battery active, because if the battery isn't active, it's going to naturally discharge to an extent, but it also can sometimes cause the battery to go lazy. Same as like a car battery. A car batteries, if they're on the shelf for a while, will eventually die off and they will be thrown away. And the same with these type of batteries. They like to be used. If you're not using it, it can affect the battery life. I don't entirely understand the reasons why. And it's not just isolated to our batteries because our batteries are pants. It's just science. It's just something that happens. And it being used will make a difference. Now, obviously, if your boat's in storage, you can't use it. That's fine, that's fine. However, there are solutions. And the solution to that is one of these. Now, this is what we call a battery to USB conversion lead. And essentially what it does is it plugs into your battery on the side like so, which then powers up this unit. As you can see, the LED's now gone red. And you're using your battery as a power bank at that point. You're using that to drain the battery down and put charge into something else. So here I have an old iPhone, and here I have a USB lead for it. So I'm just going to connect all this. This phone is completely flat, by the way, so you should hopefully see the icon come up on it in a moment. Any moment, I'm hoping. There we go. And now at this point, what we're doing is we're draining the battery down, putting charge into my old phone. And this is going to just keep your battery active. It's going to keep it in use, and it's going to do it a world of good in the long run. And obviously that's what we want. We want to try and keep these batteries going as long as we possibly can. And just as I mentioned a moment ago, you'll see that this battery here has a date stamp. So on every single battery we do, you'll have a product code. And the number here, 22, is the year of manufacture. So this battery is actually over 3 years old at this point, and it works perfectly fine. This is actually one of our very own test batteries that we use for testing bait boats that come in. And the reason why our batteries last so long, our own personal ones, is obviously we're using them on a fairly regular basis. You know, we're using our test batteries to test boats every single day. They're going through use, but then also they're getting charged back up after. And that is the main thing. That's the main point to take from this, is keeping the battery active. So like I was saying, obviously with that in mind, we know not everybody can use their boat at all times. Not all of us do. But keep your battery active as much as you can. Now, it's not going to be the be-all, end-all. It's genuinely going to make a minute bit of difference, but you are going to make sure that your battery is lasting as long as possible. Now, obviously, one thing to remember is the realistic shelf life of a type of battery like this. Now, online on Google suggests that this type of battery will usually last on average around 2 years. Now, that is correct, but you can make them last longer. As I mentioned, these batteries have had so many hours of actual use, and because they've been maintained the way that we maintain them, which we know not everybody can do. You know, this battery, for example, 3 years old, I've got some that are 4 years old. But you've also got to obviously bear in mind that these smaller batteries will have a shelf life anyway. As well as leaving the battery part discharged and not using it, another thing that is a very common, if not maybe slightly more common, I would suggest, than the previous issues or previous things I've just mentioned, is overcharging. Now, leaving the battery on charge for extended periods of time is one of the worst things you can do as well. Now, we are slightly hypocritical for saying this because we're guilty of this ourselves. We have a laptop downstairs that we use every single day to book out our labels for the boats that you actually receive. That very laptop was brand new not too long ago, and since the day we've had it, we've left it on charge because it's the convenient thing to do. And now, because of that, when we disconnect it from charge, it cuts out immediately. It's become lazy. It now relies on being on charge all the time because that's all it's ever known. And the same thing will happen with the type of batteries that we use with these polylithium batteries. If you leave them on charge all the time, it's going to get used to that, it's going to get lazy, and you're not, first thing you'll notice is you're not getting the amount of life out of it that you should, to the point where eventually it will just, as soon as you unplug them off charge, it's dead. And you'll plug it into charge and it will stay on green because it's not accepting anything, it's not accepting any charge. So Charging times. If your battery's completely flat, like you've used every little bit of juice in it, you're going to be looking around a 10-hour full charge. And once the battery is charged, there's an LED indicator on the chargers that we supply. The light will go red when it's charging and it will go green once it's fully charged. Now, you're going to want to remove it off charge as soon as possible. A couple of hours ain't going to kill it. That's fine. Look, we understand that people aren't going to be staring at the LED waiting for it to go green. But the sooner the better. If you're leaving it over a weekend or even longer, yeah, you're going to have problems, absolutely, because you overcharged it. And with this type of battery, with the type of material it uses, overcharging is a big killer. So that's a big no-no. Make sure you're removing the battery off charge as soon as you possibly can. Another thing to take with that as well is the type of charger you're using. Majority of people, luckily, use our chargers that we supply with the boats. And that is obvious for us to suggest and recommend is only use the chargers that we supply with the boats because they're rated to the specific amperage and voltage and all that sort of stuff to charge the batteries at the correct rate. Now, other chargers may have the same port as this, as you can see, but they won't charge at the correct rate. So that's another important thing is the charging rate and how the battery accepts charge. You can get fast chargers and stuff like that, but the battery is not accepting the charge at the correct rate. That can also affect it. And also the same with power banks. Using a power bank to charge the battery is fine, but make sure you're using a lead that is correctly rated for the battery because, again, the power bank isn't what kills it. It's the type of lead you're using because some of those leads don't actually control or regulate the power at all. Therefore, you're going to either put way too much through it, or in some cases, some of them are so slow that they don't actually charge a thing at all. You think it's charging. Why is it taking so long to charge? Because it's rated at the wrong voltage, amperage, etc., and therefore it's not actually charging the battery at all when it should be. And I've even seen some that are so poor that actually end up taking charge out of the battery and putting the charge back into the power bank. Yeah, confusing, but essentially. And as I say, this isn't the case every single time. I'm not targeting anybody. I'm not saying it's your fault, you're doing this, you're killing your batteries. But there are genuinely a lot of common misconceptions with batteries. Every single time that we get a comment isn't necessarily always true. And obviously a lot of people, what our fear is, a lot of people see those comments and just automatically assume that our batteries are maybe very poor, which we certainly don't think is the case. There are other batteries and other options available out there. One of the most common issues with those sort of batteries, however, is the type of port. As you can see on this battery, hopefully here just in shot, you'll see that the connection, the plug port, is actually very close to the casing. And that's for a reason. It's so that you can't get the plug the wrong way around. See, on a lot of other aftermarket batteries, they don't have a casing like this. They're just in the usual sort of gel casing or whatever they quite often will have around them, and they'll have a lead coming off. And the problem with that is that the lead coming off doesn't have anything to prevent you from connecting it the wrong way around. And I know that sounds daft. You think, well, how will somebody connect the lead the wrong way around? I mean, there's a black wire and there's a red wire. But when it's late at night and we're in a bivvy with a poxy little head torch or even just don't even realise and don't even notice, it's so easy to connect the battery the wrong way around, those aftermarket batteries. And once you put a positive down a ground, bad things happen and you're looking at flying boards, etc. Now, I'm not here to talk you out of aftermarket batteries. If your boat's out of warranty anyway, and you're buying an aftermarket battery, hey, that don't matter. That's fine. And if you think those aftermarket batteries are better, that's cool. That's fine. There's also caveats with those as well. And again, they'll probably recommend you and highly suggest the same things that we mentioned about looking after your batteries. And battery care is such a big, massive thing. It's quite funny actually, because obviously the product that we sell is so good, but unfortunately the main thing that controls it, the battery, has so many variables that can cause it to be considered as a bad product. For example, if you follow my pieces of advice and you've followed them well and you have a fault with your battery, the chances are you probably have a genuine fault. These things do happen, and at which point get in touch, and we'll try and help you where we can. We'll do what we can for you. That's one of our main ethoses here, is we do what we can when we can, and we're very honest and open with everything that we do. However, if you're going through batteries at a hot rate and you genuinely believe our batteries are pants, there probably is a reason, and please just obviously follow our advice as best as you can. If you think I'm an idiot, if you think I'm wrong, that's fine. Let me know. That's absolutely fine. You know, I'll take on constructive criticism. But my aim of this video is purely just to try and help advise, try and help extend the battery life of your bait boat, whether it's one of ours or another one. If they're using the same type of batteries, same rules apply. You know, I'm just here to try and help at the end of the day. So, if you learned something from this video, brilliant. Let me know. I would love to know. And I hope it helps, and I hope it makes your batteries last a little bit longer than what they should or what they were. Take care.